What's up, everyone? Kevin Carrillo here, and welcome to another episode of the Cannabinoid Connect podcast. My guest today is Louie Lujan, Director, Government Relations, and Senior Lobbyist at CIMA Law Group. Hello, Louie Lujan.
Pleasure to be here, Kevin. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm happy you're here. Has anybody ever told you that it's really fun to say your name?
They have. As a matter of fact, I share this story with people a lot. I was a mayor of a city, way back when. And I jokingly tell people, but I think it's true. My name is part of the reason why I won, man. It's easy to remember. Louie Lujan. It just flows off the tongue.
I'm sure you were able to create a pretty creative those jingles, right?
Right. Yeah.
For your ads, for your campaign. So it probably just stuck with people. Louie Lujan.
It stuck with people, man. I bet, I should create a jingle, man, going forward. I should just take my show on the road and run in different cities and see how effective it is,
You could do it, man. I think that there's something there. Yeah. Well, I'm really happy that you're on. Like I said earlier, you're one of the first guests that have true expertise when it comes to the state, local, and federal government level as it relates to the cannabis industry. In the past, we have had Alyssa Nolan on, who helped lobby legislation here in Texas, and she was great. And now I'm just interested in really learning more about the government's perspective as it relates to cannabis laws and current issues that are out there, and also what's happening specifically in your neck of the woods, which is Arizona. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's a lot going on in the world of cannabis, so to speak. So I'm more than happy to chat about it and see where that goes.
Great. Well, before we dive into those current issues and laws around cannabis, let's first let the audience get a sense of who you are and your background. So from what I read from your bio on the website, you've been in government in the past 18 years, at all three levels, state, local, and federal. And you specialize in navigating clients through the process and doing business with government. And you serve as an ambassador between your clients and the government agencies. So talk a little bit about how you got started in the space and then, specifically cannabis.
Yeah, I can. I wish I had a very romantic type story to how I got started in government, but it's kind of gritty and a bit odd, but I'll share it briefly. When I was in college, I went to USC, Trojan for life, and those are for all my UCLA friends out there. Just want to poke them a bit, So when I was there, I was actually a physics and astronomy major, and I had no interest in government whatsoever. I wouldn't say no interest; it just wasn't my thing, I didn't dislike it; it just wasn't my thing. And one day I woke up and I decided I didn't really want to wear a lab coat the rest of my life in my career. Nothing against those that do. Folks at JPL, for example, they're wonderful. But anyway, I went to my career counselor and I said, what can I do to get out of here in 4 years? I don't want to stay here for 5 years as a physics major. He basically got this. Back then you had books, so he brought the book out. Now he would look online and he says, well, it looks like the only major that's going to suit you for 4 years is political science. You want to switch over? And I had this, this moment of, holy crap, this is real, So I did it. I switched over. I kept my minor, believe it or not, in physics and astronomy, and then tacked on the political science major. And there was a requirement that I got an internship to fulfill the major of political science. I got the internship. The rest is history. I graduated. I enjoyed it so much, I eventually decided to run for office. And after that, got into the private sector. And of course, I'm fast forwarding quite a bit, but that led me up to present day time.
Wow. Well, you and I are similar in that my Bachelor of Arts degree is in political science with a minor in sociology. So it was similar for me as well. When I was in college, I never liked science. I never liked math, remembering all those formulas and those numbers. And oh my God, it just gave me a headache. So my first math class in college, I failed the first two exams, and I was studying so hard, doing after hours with the lecture, the tutors and everything. And they finally the professor says, I don't think you're going to pass this next test. And I said, thank you so much for being honest. I went to the, admissions, and I just completely dropped the course and picked up a whole new major, and the rest is history, So I'm with you on that, man. It was good. It's a good major.
It happens, man. It happens. And, you look in life, you never really know where it's going to go until you just kind of let it happen. And that was my situation. So, luckily I enjoy what I do. I mean, there are horror stories of people that have this similar story happen to them and they end up in a career that's terrible. But in my case, I absolutely love it. And by the way, if you could see the other side of my office right now, I have, physics and astronomy is my hobby. I have a picture of the very beginning of the universe behind me. I have the famous moonrise photo taken by the astronauts, the Apollo astronauts. So it's still my hobby to this day.
Sure, sure. Well, that's good. You can keep on to things that you're passionate, but
Absolutely.
doing something where you're making money. So that's good. So let's talk a little more about your background. So specifically in government. So you said you ran for office, you worked in the private sector. So touch on those things, but then, when did you decide to make the pivot into the specifically focus on cannabis?
Yeah, so it's an interesting story. Well, first of all, when I ran for office, I was 19, 20 years old when I decided to file. And I got to be frank with you and everyone that may be listening. I did not have a passion for government. It wasn't something that I wanted to go in and make a change. And it sounds strange, but I'm being honest. I did it almost as a bet. A friend of mine got together and he said, I'm not going to tell you what the bet was. I can't do that here online. But if I lost the bet, I had to, yeah. let's just say that let's just say I lost the bet, right? And so I had to run for office and I kept my word. And of course, I'm being a little bit funny. I did have somewhat of an interest in running, but it wasn't like your traditional story of, I want to make a difference and a change. I just went for it and I did it. Ran for office and I started getting into certain things that considered economic development. One of the areas of economic development was whether or not the city at some point was going to consider to bring in dispensaries. And it was a very controversial issue back then. And this was 2001, 2003-ish in California, LA County. And the issue back then was controversial. Of course, now it's different. But that's how I essentially got into running for office, making the decision, and eventually getting into the whole cannabis space was through pushing that initiative that I thought was the right thing for the city, at least from an economic development perspective.
And that was before recreation or adult use came into place, right? So these were medical dispensaries.
Oh yeah, man. This was before that. This was when we had people on the council that thought it was, your grandfather's weed or something, right? I mean, these were rough times, man. And I remember telling him, I mean, this is not your, like your Joe Cocker type, high times we went, issue. I mean, this is a whole different. So I found myself having to educate a lot of my colleagues even on the industry.
And was that knowledge that you gained from like just research, or I mean, did you use as recreation? I mean, how did you?
Yeah, so a lot of the education was self-taught. It really was. I asked a lot of questions of a lot of people that were experts. At least, they said they were experts in the industry. Back then, you had a whole host of characters. I mean, you still do, but back then, even more so. And I just asked a lot of questions, and I did my research. My brother was really involved in the industry for a while. He helped run some dispensaries out in the west side of LA.
Okay.
And I would ask him a lot of questions about the industry. So it was a combination of, being self-taught and seeking advice from experts.
Got you. Okay. So you start to see that medical dispensaries are emerging. There's a lot of economic benefits as well as medicinal benefits for patients, right? So you jump into that, and then how does that evolve from there?
Well, we hit a big roadblock, man. I mean, you're here learning all this information, thinking, and keep in mind, I was a younger elected official thinking that the way things worked was, hey, you learn about something, you present it to your council, you present it to the community, and eureka, you have a policy. And in reality, that it didn't happen that way. So you hit a roadblock, and I found myself really believing in it, not just from an economic perspective, but from it really helped people type of perspective, from a health perspective. And I just could not garner any support on the council to even put the item on the agenda. You had one of my colleagues actually was open to at least discussing it, but whether or not this person would vote for it at the end of the day was, it was questionable. But to your question, we hit a roadblock at some point.
And what were their main concerns? Was it fully driven around the stigma and the fact that marijuana is deemed a Schedule I narcotic at the federal
Oh
level?
yeah, it was stigma. It's all stigma, and a lot of these folks. Keep in mind, nothing against them. I mean, they grew up in a different time, and I was a young elected official. Most of my colleagues were in their 50s, 60s, 70s, even. And one woman was on the council, even older than that. Born and raised in the Midwest, came out to California, ran for office, won. I was not going to get anything through to her. So to them, it was weed from the 60s. It was marijuana. It was people getting high and Woodstock and all this stuff, and that just wasn't the case with what we were trying to do.
Mm-hmm. So, how long did that fight go on, or that back and forth in trying to garner support?
Yeah, so a few years, and it evolved over time. It took a lot of arm twisting, a lot of deal making, a lot of convincing, a lot of educating, and finally, you started seeing a lot of this synergy, a lot of this energy coming from other cities as well. Because keep in mind, it was a city of La Puente. I'll throw the city out there, and we were the first city in the entire San Gabriel Valley to actually even consider dispensaries in our city. So once we started doing that, other cities started, analyzing the situation from an economic perspective. How much tax dollars can this bring us? Is this the right thing? Does it really help with people's health? When you start asking those questions and investing resources, a little more energy starts to form. And we eventually were able to actually get presentations made to the city council from legitimate dispensary owners, or at least people that were proposing them on the medicinal side.
And those presentations entailed what? Just like how the brick and mortar, the blueprints of what it looks like, how they'll regulate it, things like that.
Yeah. Yeah, they entailed a lot of that, but also we wanted business plans. We wanted, give us your economic forecast, give us some numbers, introduce us to your CFO. We wanted to make sure that this just wasn't, Jose and Bob and Samantha, throwing together a shop on the corner. We really did our homework on it, and it took years because of that. But I'm glad we did it that way, because we finally, at the end of the day, were able to get some dispensaries to open up in our community. Now, it's not a complete story of nirvana. Everything worked out at the end. There were a lot of kinks we had to iron out. I can get into that later, but essentially, it took a few years to get there.
Mm-hmm. And so now fast forward, I'm sure, and we can touch on other things that happened in your career along the way, but fast forward, you're now in Arizona, working as the director of government relations, and you're a senior lobbyist for CIMA Law Group. And I know that this is a big year for Arizona, right? Because the Smart and Safe Arizona Ballot initiative is going to be voted on in November. So
yeah, exactly. And the presidential election, that's a whole other reason too, man.
it's a big year, and this next month is going to be really interesting. It's gonna be crazy. Yeah,
it's already getting crazy, but we're just hoping that things go our way. And but with regard to the initiative that you're speaking of, this is a huge deal. People have to understand that this, first of all, it's polling really well. Second of all, it's being challenged from every single group that's against it you can possibly imagine. But at the end of the day, I think it's going to pass.
let's explain what it is. So go ahead and explain to the audience what the Smart and Safe Arizona Ballot Initiative is.
Yeah, so there's a lot of details to it, but essentially what I can tell you is this. If you look at California's law that was recently passed to allow for the recreational use of cannabis, that's exactly what they're proposing here in Arizona. So essentially, the easy way to understand it is that Arizona would join the ranks of, say, California, Colorado, and so forth. At the end of the day, there are some nuances, there are some differences, but really that's all, that's what it comes down to.
And
legalization.
And you said it's polling very well. So public support is there, it sounds like.
Public support is there, absolutely. Now, it was on the ballot not too long ago, and it was defeated, but it wasn't defeated by much. From an electoral standpoint, it was a pretty solid defeat. But when you look at it from who voted, who actually was out there campaigning against it. When you look at it from that perspective, it didn't really lose by much. Now, at the end of the day, a loss is a loss. I get it. But this time around, I have a really good feeling about it. The momentum is there, and there's opposition, but not nearly as loud. And there's a lot of money behind it this time. So it seems to be going in the right direction.
That's good. And what do for when it comes to public support, is it that they're seeing the economic impact through taxation, or are they seeing the medicinal benefits, or just the recreational opportunities? Like what is it that they're really standing behind?
Yeah, man, they want to be able to have it in their house and enjoy it in the streets. But now that, of course, I'm being a little funny, but that's part of it. Now, a lot of people nowadays, I think the answer to the question is kind of, it's a complex answer, but I'll say it like this. For too long, I think people have this negative opinion, or this stigma, like you said earlier, to marijuana, right? But in reality, cannabis as a whole, it's just an entirely different realm, an entirely different industry now than it was before. So I think people are realizing that, number one. So it's just the professionalizing of the industry, making sure that people understand that cannabis is just not, like I said earlier, your grandfather's drug, so to speak, that it was before. But the other part of the answer is this: it's time. You look at other things that you look at some of the serious problems from a health perspective that we have. Some of the veterans that are coming back with really serious disorders that doctors just easily want to medicate. Or from personal experience, my father was a Vietnam veteran, and he came back with a lot of these post-traumatic stress disorders. And I wish that he passed away, but I wish he were around to be able to try some of the treatments that cannabis allows. I have a dog that was diagnosed with a rectal tumor that we are now giving cannabis to, and she's responding very well. So I think the answer really evolves from that. It's just viewed differently now, and people understand that, hey, this is just not someone smoking a joint on the corner, listening to music all day. That's just not what it's about anymore.
Right. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. With the emergence of the marketing of CBD and it being kind of categorized in that health and wellness area, it has been good, right? Because it's
Absolutely.
going for further research and learnings and peer review studies for the cannabinoids that are found in the cannabis plant. So there's
Absolutely.
that about that. And you touched on it earlier, where you said that what really pulled you and gravitated you to this market or this industry is that it helps people, right?
Right.
The value add for people. Now let's switch gears a little bit and talk about the industrial hemp market, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
2018 Farm Bill passed, allowing for mass cultivation of hemp across the United States. I know Texas is in their first growing season. So along the lines of public perception, what is Arizona's viewpoints on the industrial hemp market?
Well, first of all, I got to say, we have had very good experiences with the Department of Agriculture. Our firm here does a lot of work in the hemp sector, if you will, the hemp industry, and we've helped several applicants apply for a hemp license. There's different kinds, not to go into the detail here, but essentially, people come to us and they say, look, we want to get in the industrial hemp industry. What do we do? So we have been able to walk them through A through Z. And our experiences with the Arizona Department of Agriculture have been very positive. There's a gentleman there, I don't want to say his name out here necessarily, but he's very, very helpful. He's the only point of contact there. He's wonderful. He's great. They appointed the right person for that. So from an administrative perspective, I think the state has it right. I think they've done that part of it right. Now, in terms of long term, one of the challenges I think that we're going to start seeing is, this is Arizona, and after all, some of these industrial hemp farms are way out in the middle of nowhere, so to speak. And just the transportation, some cities don't allow for certain types of transportation. Some cities have very strict ordinances against, just various things that are going to make it challenging for some of these people to stay in business. So again, that's a whole other topic, but for the most part, it's been done right, but we're going to see a lot of challenges coming up soon, I think.
And those challenges are they all vary state to state, right? Because after the 2018 Farm Bill was passed, the USDA basically put it on the states to submit their state plan on how they're going to regulate hemp, right?
Yeah.
So it sounds like, which is different than Texas, it sounds like Arizona has different counties and towns where they don't want the transportation of hemp to be going through those cities, right?
Yeah, that's a very, very good point. So Arizona is a very, well, Arizona is unique, as is every state, trust me. But when it comes to hemp and cannabis even, it's very unique because you have the state government that, for the most part, I will say, has been very good about processing applications, helping those that are interested. So you have that element to it. But you're right. At the end of the day, each city has the authority to kind of draft these ordinances and these laws around cannabis, around hemp, around transportation, and around all of the operations that go into these two industries. So it's this whole lesson in state government versus local government powers, who wins, who has more control, all those types of issues. It's a very interesting graduate study research project, I would say. So, yeah.
It is. It is. One thing that I've kind of just been learning as I've had these different podcast episodes is that, it's very clear that the plant has been kind of
Yeah.
dissected and cut up into three different categories, where within each of those categories, and we'll call them marijuana, which is a term used by the government, which is THC, right?
Right.
And you have cannabis, which could be any product from CBD to CBG to CBN, the various cannabinoids, and then you have hemp, which you can make building materials from, or
Right.
products, right, tangible things. So, but within each of those classifications, there's different regulations within all of them.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
You're absolutely right, and you bring up a point that, before I forget, I want to mention here, is that people sometimes give the analogy of prohibition, right? And it's somewhat accurate, but for the most part, alcohol didn't have those three types of categories. I mean, it was alcohol, it was it, right? And it was a whole different time and all that. But when you transpose exactly what you just said into today's political climate, into today's reality, even throw COVID in there, I mean, it is a whole complex arrangement of things, that are going on that have to be worked out. So you're right. It is not just a straightforward type of, hey, we're here, let's make this happen type of situation.
And it's no wonder why it's so confusing, and people are it's no fault to anyone. It's that because we've made the regulation around cannabis so complex, it's that even the basic learning of it is challenging, because it's like, okay, what term are we using? Oh, are we talking about marijuana, or are we talking about hemp?
Oh. I'll give you an example of a brief story here. We helped a client not too long ago that was trying to expand into Los Angeles. It's Culver City, exactly. Now, LA County has 88 cities alone, 88 cities in one county, okay? And this client was trying to move into Culver City, and we went over there with them, and we found a property that fit and matched up with the city's ordinances perfectly. It was an old auto parts store. Okay, great. Put the deposit down. The guy was going to buy the building, because keep in mind, you can't even file an application unless you have a property in mind, or at least have one under contract. You can't just go as a fly-by-night without a real estate transaction about to happen or happening, right? So we help a lot of clients with that understanding, by the way, too. It's complicated. But anyway, so we get to the finish line, and we find out that the property is adjacent to the city of Los Angeles, who has in their ordinance, around a particular residential area, you can't have a dispensary within 200, whatever it was, feet. And we're like, well, wait a minute, that's a whole different city. And so Culver City is like, well, we don't have that in our ordinance. And then City of LA said, yeah, we do. Well, which one wins, the City of LA or Culver City? The property is adjacent to it's right on the border of each one. So our clients, the City of LA was going to fight them on it. And they said, look, we just don't have those kind of resources to fight the City of LA. So it gets complicated and crazy, so yeah.
That's a really good example. I can't imagine like being in that position. There's another example that comes to mind. It's fairly new in terms of what I've learned. What do you know about Delta 8?
Not much. Sounds like it was like a secret society or something, man.
It might be a secret society. I don't know. What I'm referring to is Delta 8 THC. So
Okay. Right.
my understanding of this, and I've had legal experts on, I've talked about it, I've had geneticists on. So if I butcher this, everybody listening, I'm sorry. But from my understanding, it's you build you grow a hemp plant, right, or cannabis plant that
Yeah.
has 3 or less THC, right?
Okay.
You grow a THC dominant plant. So in California where it's legal, and
Right.
and from my understanding, there's Delta 8 and Delta 9. So Delta 9 is like a very, very high potency THC that's extracted from the THC dominant plant, the plant you grow in
Oh,
California. But then you've got Delta 8, which is THC extracted from a cannabis plant that has zero point 0.3 or zero point 0.3 THC or less. So
okay.
it's full spectrum THC, but it's Delta 8 and it's legal in every state because it's extracted from a plant that has zero point 0.3 THC or less.
Yeah. Right. That's interesting. Okay. I have not heard this before. I got to do my homework on this one.
So again, I may be butchering it. That's how I understand it, but I'm bringing it up because it's so crazy that I mean I went to the local CBD coffee shop in my neighborhood, and there's
Got it.
these Delta 8 THC pens, and I'm like, wait,
Oh my God.
and I tried, and it's exactly like if you were smoking THC, and so I'm like, okay, they found a loophole here,
Yeah.
so I don't. I don't know how that'll be regulated or what, but that is super interesting.
You know, put it this way, and look, I come from the world of government. Okay. I have it's weird for anyone to say have a soft spot in your heart for government, but I do because I understand how government works. Most people in government are in it for the right reasons and they want to do the right thing, but they take their orders from someone, right? If government has an opportunity to regulate something, they most likely will, especially if it involves an item or a product or whatever um, that hey, is controversial and it could potentially bring economic development. So how it's going to be regulated, I don't know, but will it? It sounds like it will, if you ask me. Sure.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Mhm.
So that's what I want to talk to you about. I'm very interested in the government's perspective on all this, right?
Yeah.
Uh,
Okay.
I'm talking at the federal level because
Okay.
how many years has it been now where this plant has been classified as Schedule 1? Has it been over 40 years?
Over 40, man. Yeah, it's ridiculous if you ask me, but yeah. Yeah.
It's insane, right? And we
Yeah.
just talked
Yeah.
about how they're piecemealing and can
Yeah.
classifying this plant in 3 different ways, which is making it super complex. So, and my last point before I ask the question is, I've read this book and I always talk about it on the podcast. The Emperor Wears No Clothes,
Oh yeah.
Jack Herer, right?
Hmm.
And really talks about how at the time during the so-called marijuana reefer madness phase, right, where
Right.
they were essentially, you know, classifying this drug as something that minorities like blacks and Latinos, uh, take, and they do horrible things when they're on it. And it was really just to stigmatize it because their overall goal was the industry, right?
Right.
Saw petroleum and they saw the wood industry making and producing materials that, of course, hemp has always done for hundreds of years, right?
Right.
So my question to you is, and every politician is different, of course, but overall, is it really the protection of these industries that have been in place, like petroleum and wood, for so long that they feel threatened that the floodgates will open with industrial hemp? Um, is it really just ignorance and stupidity when it comes to just basic understanding of all the applications and the benefits of this plant, even if they don't want to do it, you know? So,
Yeah. Yeah. So you got to ask me that question, huh? Okay, man. So I'll take a shot at it here. Look, um, it in my opinion, okay. the simple answer is yes. It does have to do with industries and different industries that have powerful lobbies that have the right access to the right people. Now, does that imply that there's some evilness going on or some type of conspiracy going on? I don't know. That's not for me to answer. But when it comes down to simple things that people should understand, it's no secret that the pharmaceutical industry has a very large lobby, but it's also no secret that the realtor industry, real estate officials have a large lobby too. Now, each of them have access to key decision makers. Is that to say that realtors are evil? No. Is that to say that people in the pharmaceutical industry are evil and up to some conspiracy? No. It just means that that old saying, money talks. And if you have access to decision makers, more often than not, you're going to have decisions made your way. Look, even on the local level, when I was mayor, people would come in because they got to know me. They would attend my events. They would go to fundraisers. They would make an effort to reach out and make me understand their part of the story. Well, if they make me understand their part of the story and try to educate me, and I'm not hearing from anyone else because the other side doesn't have the resources to get to me, guess what? I only have that to go on, right? So I think that's part of it. And I don't think it's a big evil conspiracy. I just think that at the end of the day, they have powerful lobbies with the ability to do this. I also think that there's a societal component to this where, it was viewed as the counterculture. It was viewed as, people getting high and causing crimes and all that, going against the man. That's just more of a societal stigma that was successfully thrown out there, and it's stuck, right? If someone's going to cause crime and problems and well, you blame them because, oh, they're high or whatever, right? And that's just, you see that in other things in society as well. It's not specific to say, quote unquote marijuana. It's just the way it was. So yeah, that's.
So I hear what you're saying. So you're saying, of course, there are powerful lobbyists,
Yeah,
behind certain political parties, or where they're pushing certain issues because it's in their best interest, right? And
right.
then you have and then you said about the counterculture and these different events that have really molded the stigma around it, where it's just kind of hurt public awareness and knowledge
Right.
and understanding of it, right?
That's right.
So that all makes sense. What do you think about like the industrial hemp industry, and like, will the government eventually see that this is something that could really save small town America, especially during,
Yeah.
post this pandemic? I mean, do you think that they'll be more open to seeing this as an economic relief, right?
I,
Or not?
I do, and I'm glad you brought that up, because that right there is one of the underlying, or I should not underline, but I should say it's kind of the most underrated areas about industrial hemp, I feel. Industrial hemp can involve people that are currently in agriculture, that have failing farms, for example, or that because of the pandemic have seen their incomes drop dramatically. So I think industrial hemp is a way for a lot of young people and people in the current agricultural industry to get involved. Now, with regard to the question about the government, yes, I think they will see that, because a lot of these people, like I said, already have farms. They already, speak for folks, for example, in the Midwest, or even farms out in Arizona. I mean, they're farmers. So I do think that. And finally, with regard to industrial hemp, it doesn't necessarily have the stigma that, say, cannabis does. It's because, like you said, it's used for products, it's clothing, it's different resources that you can utilize from it. So it's almost like a dressed up cousin, if you will, of the whole industry, right? So it's lesser of a punch to a lot of people. Why? I don't know, but that's just how people perceive it. So.
Right. I mean, I just had Morris Beagle on, and he
Oh,
showcased
yeah.
his hemp guitar.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. Yeah.
So I think when people more and more start to see those types of items or products being made from this amazing plant, they're going to be like, huh, they're going to think twice. It just,
Oh,
the
yeah.
market needs to catch up with it, right? With itself.
Oh man, we could do a whole show just on what can be made from hemp alone. I mean, it is absolutely incredible and amazing. I encourage people to educate themselves on industrial hemp, because you simply Google it. I mean, you could spend weeks upon months just learning about it and the products that come from it. And even more fascinating, how other countries around the world are capitalizing on that industry alone. So it is an extremely, I would say, an underrated industry right now. But look, another thing I'll mention on this topic, since we're on it, we have helped a lot of clients that are minorities that are getting into industrial hemp here in Arizona. And I think that's one of the areas that a lot of people don't realize, that there is a huge movement, if you will, of minorities that are getting involved in industrial hemp. So it's interesting. I think we're going to see a lot of new companies as a result in the near future.
Specifically, where in the industry, like on the growing side, on the processing side?
I've seen more on the growing side, but I also have seen on the processing side as well. But primarily from what I've experienced on the growing side, yeah.
That's great. That's great. Yeah.
Even people in the real estate industry that traditionally would not want to touch it. I don't want to help you find a dispensary. I don't want to help you find, farmland because I could lose my license with the state, or even attorneys. Hey, I don't want to touch that. The bar may come down on me, right? So even that's beginning to change. So it's interesting.
Have you felt that in your own personal experience in your career? Like when you were in this, did you get some?
Hey man, yeah. Look, I'll tell you something. I come from California, right? So born and raised in Southern California. I mean, this thing has been around, cannabis, hemp, since the 90s, right? I come here and I present to my firm, hey, I want to, in the government relations office, we have real estate clients, technology clients. And I come up with this crazy idea that I want to go into the cannabis. I want to bring some cannabis clients, right? And everybody kind of just around the table, just kind of like, oh my God, looking for a way to get out of the room, right? So it really, really surprised me that the stigma here in Arizona is very thick, negative thick, that is. And so it was a shock, because I came from a society in Southern California, if you will, and a culture where it was much more accepted and much more viewed upon as a solution and not a problem.
Right.
Even to this day, it's a lot better. But even to this day, you bring it up around other attorneys or other professionals in the industry, and there's this always, hey, let's go talk in the corner kind of a thing, And I'm like, no, man, we're gonna stay here. Let's talk about it here,
They start getting nervous when you bring that up.
Yeah. They start fidgeting and who's looking and all that kind of stuff. It's bizarre, but
well,
it is what it is.
It's good to see that someone in your position, who is the director of your firm, is you're normalizing those conversations.
Yeah, it's hemp and cannabis. Come on, I mean.
Right. Exactly. I'm mixed, because I don't know. Like, I hear a lot of outside Texas people outside of Texas think that Texas is so conservative and against it, and of course in rural areas, I'm sure. But like the city of Dallas, I don't get that feeling at all, man. And then if you go to Austin,
I mean, come on, man.
Austin's like the most liberal city there is, so it's I think that these bigger cities, the stigma is definitely and is lessening, and the public support is getting there.
It is. And also I agree with you 100%, but I also will say, to add on what you say, sometimes that perception that, the rural farm folks or the people out in the burbs are against it, I even think that's overrated. You talk to some of these folks out in the farm areas, they see industrial hemp as an example as a solution in the future. Even into the suburbs, man. I mean, people are not as against it as you think. It's just more of a perception that's put out there.
See, and I agree with you. I was saying that to be safe, you know what I mean? But especially Texas, you're right, because there's so much land out here, and there's so many legacy farmers that, I mean, there's been 850 licenses been issued to farmers to grow hemp in this first year, and they're expecting 2,000 to 3,000 in the next year. So to your point, yeah, I agree with you, man. I think that is it's even less now for rural areas also,
When it is, because when you start realizing that the government, at least when they start realizing that, hey, this can be a cash cow, so to speak, and you don't ever want to do it just for that reason. That's not the number one reason, but it is a motivator for government. In many cases, probably the first motivator, for better or for worse. But now that they've been able to see that, you're gonna start seeing, cannabis and hemp, industrial hemp as a whole, different element and a whole different industry to get into. So you
Mhm.
even see colleges and universities now having industrial hemp programs, cannabis programs, degrees. I mean, it's an industry that's coming out of the shadows in a very professional way.
You're so right. I mean, Maha Huck was recently on, and she is the founder of Canna Club at UCLA and your USC.
She does both. Oh man, what is that? No, that's fine.
So she started that. I mean, the education
Yeah,
is being put in place in these universities and colleges. It's great to see.
that is absolutely great, and it's the beginning of the whole elimination of that stigma, you know. And it's funny because, as on a personal note, my girlfriend, she's also here at the law firm. She's an attorney, and we were going over to her grandparents' house, and they live in Mexico, right? And in Mexico, it's viewed upon as a whole different thing, especially with very traditional grandparents, right? And she's like, "Oh my God, are you going to tell them that we do hemp and all this and cannabis clients?" And I'm like, "What's the problem?" And the funniest thing happened, man. So we're sitting around there at the table. This is pre-COVID, obviously, and we start talking about some of the new work we're doing, and cannabis comes up, and we thought, like, the grandmother and the grandfather were going to be, get out. They were like totally open to it, man. They were like, "Oh yeah, I heard it's great. I heard it helps cancer. I heard, with my arthritis, and we're like, "Oh man, let's go get some samples from our clients." So it's, look, I think this, yeah, exactly. I think the stigma is overrated in a lot of cases. And that's just one example.
Well, I'm starting to see it even like my parents' generation and my the people of my family at that age, and same thing, man. I mean, before the stigma was so bad, but again,
Yeah.
with the legitimacy of CBD and all the medical value that it brings, they're starting to be more open to it, and obviously they're using it. I have grandparents that have illnesses, and my parents are getting them CBD, and it's good. It's helping them. So
Our dog, man, I kid you not, she has a tumor, a rectal tumor, poor little dog, but she's still around, and the only thing she responds to is the oil that we give her, the CBD oil. And we have a mixture from someone that actually customizes a little mixture for us. She's been on steroids. She's been on Palladia, which is a chemotherapy drug. Both, nothing against those drugs. For some pets it works well, but ours had a very bad reaction. We transitioned her over to the CBD only with a little bit of THC, and it's worked very well for her. So now, I'm not saying it's a cure, of course not, but in terms of reactions and keeping her healthy, she's responded to that the best. So
right.
there's a lot to be studied still, and it's just from personal experience, I can say it works.
Well, that's good to hear. And I mean, you're absolutely right in that we're only scratching the surface. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
there's what, 150 or so cannabinoids in the plant. We discovered like 8 or 15.
Man,
Now.
and you're right. And the crazy thing is to think, like, who knows way back when how many ancient cultures knew way more about the plant than we even do now, right? And maybe they didn't have the scientific breakdown on spreadsheets and all that, but just the knowledge of the plant, it's almost like we're just going way back and understanding for the first time what ancient cultures perhaps already knew. So in many ways, it's not new, right? I mean, in many ways, it's like a rediscovery of what the plant can do. So
Yeah.
it's amazing. There's a lot to still learn. You're right.
We've been in phase 1 for this plant for the last 30 years or 30,000 years.
Yeah, pretty much. I swear, man, the first company that finds a way to commercialize it on the moon, man, hey, there you go. I threw it out there. There you go, man.
Elon Musk sent a bag of weed to space, I think, in his last shuttle. There was an article that was
Oh,
talking.
get out of here. Really?
I know that was the plan before COVID, and they had to delay the rocket going off. So I have a follow-up story, but yeah, he was some weed out there and see how
Get
it
out of here.
adapts. Yeah.
That is wild, man. Can you imagine, like, the space helmet all like fogged up? I mean, that's crazy.
Cats have to be taking weed up there. They
Oh man, I tell you.
bored.
Yeah, man. Who's gonna, imagine a spacewalk on cannabis? Man, that's a whole other, man. I bet you there's someone out there that would pay for that, man. Like, I want to be the first one to spacewalk. Get out there.
And you're smoking a joint and you're just looking at Earth. Can you imagine that? I couldn't. It's surreal. You know,
It's I'm sure there's someone out there that would pay big money for that, man, and it's going to happen. Watch, it is wild, man. I tell you, it's like,
it's crazy times we're living
it
in.
is,
That's
it
for
is, it is.
so.
Yeah.
Tell me about what CIMA and you specifically lobby for when it relates to cannabis. Um,
Yeah.
there's current issues and laws out there that we know of. Obviously during COVID, the SBA not including cannabis companies in their relief programs. Things
Yeah.
vape crisis and things like that. So what all are you doing specifically?
Well, okay. First of all, CIMA Law Group is divided up into two parts, right? So one is the traditional legal, where they do immigration law, they do personal injury law, they do criminal law. We do a lot of drug trafficking cases, even small offenses like marijuana offenses. We do things like that on that side. On my side of the firm, we do government relations in various industries, real estate, technology, and of course, cannabis. Now, when it comes to cannabis, the type of government relations and lobbying we do primarily rest in two categories. One is where we help applicants that are interested in either opening up a dispensary or expanding on one, or they have an issue with the city that they need representation at a hearing for. We've attended public hearings, we've helped fill out applications, we have contacts in the real estate industry where we've helped the process of a real estate transaction that involved a cannabis dispensary, things like that. Now, the other category is more of the education, where we are educating by providing legislative updates to the industry. We have a newsletter that goes out on a weekly basis to interested people in the cannabis industry and hemp industry. We attend events. We go out and attend events, of course, pre-COVID. Now it's online, where we'll go and make a presentation about how to speak to a city council member about cannabis. A lot of people in the industry know their stuff really well, but how do you present it to the mayor and not come across as, someone that's just trying to push cannabis, right? So there's certain educational components that we train them about. So we do things like that. It's government relations on one side, and then of course it's lobbying a bit on the other.
Right. And then the education factor that you bring up, which
Yeah,
is important. Yeah.
exactly.
So, what are more of your common clients? I mean, is there a lot of clients that are wanting to start their own cannabis businesses? Is it a mixture of all the ones you mentioned, or?
We have a mixture of both. We have a lot of existing clients in the industry. Some are bigger. We don't have more. If there's a cannabis client that has a conflict, in other words, if there's two dispensaries that are next to each other and they compete, we can't. It's a conflict of interest. So we represent cannabis dispensaries that don't have conflicts with others. And then we also get people that are interested in the industry but have no idea how to get into it. Now, and we tell them right away, hey, look, do you have a criminal record? That could be a problem, but it's not necessarily a bar to the industry.
Mhm.
And the golden question, you want to open up a dispensary, but do you even own a shop? Do you have a real estate transaction going on? Because they won't even look at you if you don't. So yeah, those are the two types of clients we get, those in the industry and those that are looking to get in.
Got you. And I would imagine if the Arizona Smart and Safe ballot initiative passes, y'all are going to be really busy at that point.
You know what? Right now, we're gearing up for that, as a matter of fact. We are sending out newsletter updates. We send out a regular legislative update to clients in the industry. But, I'm going to share something with you as well. And we also send updates to people that are not just in the cannabis industry. And of course, we do it from a business perspective, but we also do it because we're really trying to educate everybody about cannabis and hemp. We don't just restrict our newsletter about cannabis and hemp to those in the cannabis and hemp industry. We send it to industry professionals, other attorneys, people in law enforcement, people, other lobbyists, other attorneys in real estate, other people in technology. Just, we really want to make sure that people are educated, because at the end of the day, everyone's voting on this, and it affects everybody in a positive way. And we just want to make sure they're aware of that.
That's so great that you do that education, even outside of, the people that are directly involved in the industry, especially law enforcement, right? I mean,
Yeah.
because they've been trained for so long, to eradicate this plant just based off the terpene smell, the profile, right, and all that kind of stuff.
Right, right.
The hemp plant that's zero point 0.3 or less THC, and it's completely legal from a federal standpoint, but just because they don't have that knowledge and they're unaware, it could turn out bad. Great.
We have horror stories, man, of we have clients on the criminal side that come from California, and in California, recreational and medicinal legal, so they have something in their car. Once they cross that state line and they get pulled over on the 10 freeway, if they have that narcotic in their car, that's a felony. And people don't think about that. Crossing state lines, once you cross over, you better make sure you don't have anything in your car, because you get arrested. And hey, we do immigration law here. So imagine if you're undocumented, and that happens to you. You're in a world of, you're SOL. Let's put it that way. So it's still, in that regard, very challenging. But again, with our firm here, we take on cases like that, and we find ways to help educate so that in the future can be worked on from a legislative perspective, because we don't think that that's right. It shouldn't be scheduled like that.
Right.
It definitely shouldn't be a felony on that level, in my opinion, at least. So.
No, and not to mention, I mean, speaking along the lines of the criminal act, right, or criminalization of marijuana, I mean, that's another hot topic that's right now. Yeah. The incarcerations of people that have had petty offenses for marijuana related crimes, and they're still in jail. It's insane.
Oh man, yeah, don't get me started there. I mean, I'm preaching to the choir, but you have people with really petty offenses involving very low amounts of marijuana, cannabis, whatever you want to call it, man. And these are professionals. These are people that have careers, have been working, and then you have someone else that has attempted murder charge or something much more serious, aggravated assault with a weapon, whatever, and they're serving less time. So there's something wrong with the system when something like that is allowed to happen, and reform is very much needed. You've seen on the congressional level and on the state level, people finally understanding, yeah, we need to do something about this. It's a little too slow, in my opinion, but then again, it's government. I get it. But we're at the beginning of stages of making some change in that regard.
Yeah, no, I've definitely seen that snowball trickle effect, happening in that particular topic. And so it's good to see, because I mean, these prisons are already over capacity to begin with. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. It's a no-brainer,
I've heard jokingly, and this is a comment that, you can take it as you want, but in reality, think about this for a second, right? You've never heard of anybody starting a prison riot because they've been high, right? I mean, if anything, it's going to calm and relax you. So if you're looking to a solution to prevent prison riots, I think we just figured it out, so now, yeah. Right. Along when you check your stuff in, you should get something else in return to calm you down, right? Now I see that jokingly, partially, but the point is that the perception of cannabis, like you said, for the past 60 plus years has been what it is, and it's just unfortunate that it's criminalized to the point that it's been. It just shouldn't be like that.
So, what is the future of this industry, Louie Lujan? What do you envision where we will be? Is reform going to happen with the rescheduling and regulating of cannabis at the federal level? This election, is it going to take 4 years, another 8 years? What is it?
I have a feeling, and I share this feeling with a lot of folks in my industry that do the same type of lobbying in the field in cannabis. If the Arizona ballot initiative passes, Arizona is one of the more conservative states, at least perception-wise. It's not really that case anymore. It's more purple than you think. But if Arizona passes, you're going to see an opening of the floodgates on states that you would have traditionally thought would have never touched it. And once that happens, the government is going to have to play catch-up, because they're already so far behind on the administrative process to handle it, on the criminalization of marijuana and cannabis. They're going to have to reform so much of the criminal justice side, so much of the government agency side to process applications, that it's going to be a good thing. But at the same time, you're going to look back and realize, man, we should have prepared. We should have been better prepared for this. Now, with all that said, the local governments are doing a good job, I would say. The local governments have really analyze this issue because they're squeezed right now for money. And those budgets on the local side are really, really tight. And they look at cannabis as a way to increase revenue in many cases. So they've analyzed it. They have studies. They've hired professional firms to do studies about cannabis. They've hired engineering companies to talk about roadways for delivery, all this kind of stuff. When you look at, for example, city A and city B, one city has an ordinance allowing dispensaries. The other city has an ordinance banning transportation. How then do you get the product from A to B if the delivery facility is here, the dispensary is here, and you can't get the product to them? Those kinds of dilemmas and problems are real, but you see local governments actually dealing with them. So in that sense, the conversation has started. And to your original question, I think the future is very, very bright for the cannabis industry and for the industrial hemp industry as a whole.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're not the only one who has said that the federal government's going to be in a position of playing catch up, because the majority of the 50 states are going to be adult use.
Oh, without a doubt, and I am not even afraid to say that I would bet a large amount of money on that. It will happen. Look, I do lobbying and government relations as a career, and you hear things from people, and you go off the record with people that trust you, that are elected officials, and everything I've heard points in that direction. And I'm not just saying this out of some false optimism or whatever. I'm saying this based on conversations I've had with people that are in the know. So I would expect it to happen. Yeah, and look, that's why I've tried my best to position this firm to get into this industry, and we've done a good job at it. So I'm proud of that.
That's great. And we are pushing for y'all in November, man. If Arizona, like you said, passes that ballot initiative, it's just going to be a domino effect, right?
It is, man. It's a famous referendum, man. We're doing our best to get the word out there, and we're gonna make it happen. And all joking aside, it's one that I've had a lot of conversations with voters about this, man. And if you're not registered to vote, and you're in Arizona, register now. Vote early if you can, and look, this is an important moment for the state and for the country, because once Arizona passes it, trust me, the floodgates are going to open, and they're already open. But Arizona is going to be that signal. Mm-hmm. I believe it. I really believe it.
And when that happens, Louie, we're going to be on a follow-up podcast, and we're going to be toasting champagne. So
let's do that, man. Let's do that. I agree. No, hey, that'll be all. And at that point, I'll have some of the my colleagues here at the firm join me in, and we'll say, hey, man, I want you to tell them what you thought 6 months ago,
Yeah, you can do a little hazing and do the "I told you so," but
Yeah, but not "I told you so," but I am telling you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, hey, I appreciate your time, Louie. Is there anything else that you want to leave our audience with before we?
Just one thing, Kevin. I really want to give it to you, man. This is great. You're doing a really good job on educating people through this podcast. You did not tell me to plug you like this. I'm doing it because I really believe in what you're doing. I believe in the industry. And this is going to require as much education as possible, man. So keep it up. Anytime you need any information, resources, you let me know. I think you're doing a wonderful thing. So we're really appreciative of it.
Hey, well, I appreciate you saying that. I'm all about adding value and informing the public and just removing that stigma. Like we talked about, it's been over 60 years, and this is hindering us as a human race, right? There's so much that we can do and come together, just by involving ourselves in this plant, whether we want to partake in it from a leisure, recreational standpoint, or if we want to, actually produce material goods out of it,
Absolutely, man. And look, it's true. And it goes back to that whole stigma, and it's ending now. And again, really thank you for what you're doing. Keep it up. Really, really encourage you to invite other people that are in the industry, people that do work that I do, other attorneys, and let them know, hey, times are changing. Let's talk about this. So keep up the good work, man. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I appreciate everybody for listening. We'll talk to you again next time. All right.
Absolutely.
Guys.
Take care.